Before World War II, the histories of Taiwan and China unfolded along separate, often contrasting paths. While they are geographically close, Taiwan lying just about 100 miles off the southeastern coast of China, their political, cultural, and social developments diverged significantly over the centuries, setting the stage for the complex relationship we see today. For centuries, mainland China was ruled by a succession of powerful dynasties, each leaving its mark on the vast land. The Qing dynasty, which rose to power in the 17th century, was the last imperial dynasty to rule China. During their reign, the Qing extended their influence over Taiwan, formally claiming the island as part of their empire in 1683 after defeating Ming loyalists who had fled there. However, Qing control over Taiwan was often limited, with much of the island remaining autonomous or under local rule. Taiwan itself has a rich and unique history. Long before Chinese dynasties set their sights on the island, it was home to diverse indigenous peoples with their own languages, cultures, and traditions. Over time, waves of migrants from the Chinese provinces of Fujian and Guangdong crossed the treacherous Taiwan Strait, settling along the island's western plains. These settlers brought with them new customs, agricultural techniques, and trade, gradually blending with the indigenous population, but also creating tensions and competition for land and resources. The late 19th century brought dramatic change. In 1895, after losing the First Sino-Japanese War, the Qing dynasty was forced to sign the Treaty of Shimonoseki, ceding Taiwan to Japan. This marked the beginning of a new era for the island, as it was abruptly separated from Chinese rule and placed under Japanese colonial administration. For the next 50 years, Taiwan was transformed into a Japanese colony. The Japanese government implemented sweeping changes, introducing new systems of governance, law, and education. Cities like Taipei and Kaohsiung were modernized, and Japanese architecture began to dominate the urban landscape. The island's economy was reoriented to serve Japanese interests, with new industries and infrastructure projects springing up across Taiwan. Japan invested heavily in infrastructure, building railways, roads, and ports to better integrate Taiwan into its empire. The Japanese language was made mandatory in schools and public life, and Japanese culture was promoted at the expense of local traditions. While some Taiwanese benefited from new opportunities, many others faced discrimination and were pressured to assimilate, leading to a complex legacy of both modernization and cultural loss. Meanwhile, on the mainland, China was undergoing its own upheavals. In 1911, the centuries-old Qing dynasty collapsed in the wake of the Xinhai Revolution, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule. The Republic of China was established, promising a new era of modernization and national unity, but the reality proved far more turbulent. The early years of the Republic were marked by chaos and division. Two major political forces emerged: the Kuomintang, or Nationalist Party, and the Chinese Communist Party. These groups, with vastly different visions for China's future, quickly became bitter rivals, setting the stage for decades of civil conflict. By the eve of World War II, the contrast between Taiwan and China was stark. Taiwan, under Japanese rule, had become a relatively developed colony, with modern industries, infrastructure, and a population increasingly shaped by Japanese influence. In contrast, the Republic of China was struggling with poverty, warlordism, and political instability, its vast countryside often untouched by modernization. China was deeply divided, with regional warlords controlling large swaths of territory and the central government often powerless to enforce its will. Civil unrest, economic hardship, and the looming threat of foreign invasion made daily life precarious for millions. As the world edged closer to global conflict, both Taiwan and China stood on the brink of dramatic change. The fragile state of the region was about to be shattered by the outbreak of World War II, which would redraw borders, displace millions, and create divisions that still echo in the present day. The impact of World War II in Asia was profound and far-reaching, beginning in 1937 when Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China. This marked the start of a brutal conflict that would engulf the region for years to come, setting the stage for immense suffering and dramatic changes across East Asia. Japanese forces, equipped with modern weaponry and driven by imperial ambitions, swept across Chinese territories, capturing major cities and leaving devastation in their wake. This invasion ignited the Second Sino-Japanese War, a conflict that would become one of the deadliest in history. Fierce battles raged across the countryside and in urban centers, with both sides enduring heavy casualties. The war not only pitted armies against each other but also drew in millions of civilians who found themselves caught in the crossfire. The brutality of the conflict was epitomized by atrocities such as the Nanjing Massacre, where Japanese troops committed widespread violence against civilians and prisoners of war. The city of Nanjing was left in ruins, and the trauma of these events would haunt survivors for generations. Such acts of violence underscored the harsh realities of total war and left deep scars on the Chinese population. In response to the Japanese threat, the Kuomintang, or nationalist government, and the Chinese Communist Party set aside their bitter rivalry to form a fragile united front. This uneasy alliance was marked by mutual distrust, but both sides recognized the necessity of cooperation in the face of a common enemy. Propaganda posters and joint operations symbolized this temporary unity, even as tensions simmered beneath the surface. The war took a devastating toll on China. Cities were reduced to rubble, millions of people were displaced from their homes, and the economy was left in shambles. The nationalist government, already struggling with internal challenges, was further weakened by the relentless pressure of war. Infrastructure was destroyed, and famine and disease spread among the civilian population, compounding the suffering. For the Chinese Communists, however, the chaos of war presented an opportunity. Operating from rural strongholds, they expanded their influence by recruiting villagers and organizing guerrilla resistance against the Japanese. Under the leadership of Mao Zedong, the Communists built support among the peasantry, laying the groundwork for their eventual rise to power after the war. Meanwhile, Taiwan, which had been under Japanese colonial rule since 1895, played a crucial role in Japan's war effort. The island was transformed into an agricultural and industrial base, supplying food, materials, and manufactured goods to support the Japanese military. Factories and farms were reorganized to maximize production, and the local economy became tightly integrated with Japan's imperial ambitions. The Japanese authorities also intensified their efforts to assimilate the Taiwanese population. Through policies known as Japanization, they promoted the use of the Japanese language, enforced Japanese cultural practices, and encouraged loyalty to the emperor. Schools taught Japanese history and values, and public ceremonies reinforced the idea of a shared identity with Japan, often at the expense of local traditions. As the war intensified, thousands of Taiwanese men were conscripted into the Japanese military. Many served as soldiers, laborers, or support staff, often facing harsh conditions and uncertain fates. For some, military service was seen as a duty or an opportunity, while for others, it was a source of hardship and loss. The experience of war left a lasting impact on Taiwanese families and communities. From 1943 onward, the war reached Taiwan directly as American bombers targeted strategic sites on the island. Air raids destroyed factories, infrastructure, and homes, bringing the realities of global conflict to Taiwanese civilians. The destruction and fear caused by these attacks were a stark reminder that no part of the Japanese Empire was safe from the reach of war. Throughout the war, Taiwan's fate remained closely tied to Japan, its colonial ruler. This stood in sharp contrast to the mainland, where Chinese forces, both nationalist and communist, fought desperately to resist Japanese occupation. The experiences of people in Taiwan and China during World War II were deeply different, yet both were shaped by the sweeping forces of conflict, occupation, and resistance that defined the era. 1945 marked the end of World War II, a conflict that had engulfed the globe for 6 long years. Across Asia, people poured into the streets, celebrating the long-awaited victory over Japan. The world was filled with hope, relief, and anticipation for a new era of peace and rebuilding. For millions, the end of the war signaled not just the defeat of an enemy, but the promise of a fresh start after years of hardship and uncertainty. In China and Taiwan, the end of the war brought profound changes. Cities and villages alike were filled with a mix of joy and anxiety, as people looked to the future. The scars of war were everywhere, but so was the determination to rebuild lives and communities. For Taiwan especially, this was a turning point that would reshape its destiny. Japan's surrender in August 1945 ended 50 years of colonial rule in Taiwan. Japanese officials packed their belongings and departed, while local residents watched with a mix of relief, uncertainty, and curiosity about what would come next. The island, long under foreign control, was about to experience a dramatic shift in governance and identity. The fate of Taiwan had been decided 2 years earlier at the Cairo Conference, where Allied leaders agreed that Taiwan would be returned to Chinese sovereignty. This decision, made far from the island itself, would have lasting consequences for its people and their sense of belonging. On October 25, 1945, a formal ceremony marked the handover of Taiwan to the Republic of China. Flags changed, new officials arrived, and the island's future seemed full of possibility. Many Taiwanese welcomed the change, hopeful that self-determination and prosperity would follow. The arrival of the Kuomintang, or KMT, was initially met with enthusiasm. People celebrated in the streets, eager for a new chapter and the promise of unity with China. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered as expectations clashed with reality. The early days of KMT rule were marred by corruption, mismanagement, and economic hardship. Food shortages, inflation, and unemployment plagued daily life. Many Taiwanese soon grew disillusioned, feeling that their hopes for a better future were slipping away. The clash of cultures, unmet expectations, and growing resentment set the stage for future conflict. The events of 1945 were just the beginning of a turbulent era that would shape Taiwan's identity and its relationship with the world for decades to come. With Japan defeated, the Kuomintang and Communists resumed their rivalry. The Chinese Civil War reignited, with both sides claiming legitimacy. The Kuomintang initially had advantages but faced corruption and inflation. The Communists, led by Mao, gained rural support with land reform promises. Guerrilla tactics helped them gain control of the countryside. By 1949, the Communists had the upper hand. Facing defeat, Chiang Kai-shek retreated to Taiwan, planning to regroup. In 1949, Mao declared the People's Republic of China while Chiang retreated to Taiwan. Chiang's Republic of China claimed legitimacy, creating the two Chinas problem. The KMT's arrival in Taiwan imposed martial law and suppressed dissent. The White Terror saw thousands imprisoned or executed. Taiwan's fate was again decided by external forces separating it from mainland China. The emergence of two Chinas posed a dilemma for the world. The US and allies recognized Chiang's Taiwan, while the Soviet bloc backed Mao's PRC. The Korean War saw the US protect Taiwan, solidifying its separation from China. The ROC kept China's UN seat, while the PRC sought recognition. Both sides engaged in checkbook diplomacy for global support. The One China policy forced countries to choose, entrenching the division. For decades, Taiwan and China were in hostile confrontation. The Taiwan Strait was a Cold War flashpoint with artillery duels and crises. Taiwan's KMT government claimed all of China, focusing on economic growth. The PRC faced internal turmoil but maintained its claim to Taiwan. The US's protection of Taiwan was seen as interference by China. The 1970s saw a thaw, with Nixon's visit to Beijing shifting global diplomacy. The 1970s brought a diplomatic shift, with the UN recognizing the PRC. The US switched recognition to Beijing but passed the Taiwan Relations Act. Taiwan's isolation led to internal reform and democratization. Martial law was lifted, allowing a distinct Taiwanese identity to emerge. Economic ties with China grew, creating a complex dynamic. Despite tensions, a status quo emerged, with Taiwan acting as a self-governing entity. As of 2025, Taiwan-China relations remain complex and unresolved. The PRC views Taiwan as a renegade province aiming for reunification. Taiwan is a vibrant democracy with a strong sense of identity. The political debate is between closer ties with China or protecting sovereignty. Economic interdependence stabilizes but also creates tension. The division, rooted in World War II's aftermath, continues to shape the region's future,